Kael stood in the middle of the war zone, his heart racing as the distant sounds of explosions echoed across the barren landscape. The sky was dark, filled with thick clouds that seemed to carry the weight of the world. The war had taken everything. The once thriving cities, now reduced to rubble. The once strong alliances shattered. It was a chaotic, unforgiving world, and Kael was just one man in the middle of it all, struggling to survive. The war had started long before he was even born. A conflict between factions, humans, aliens, and unknown creatures that had spiraled out of control. But Kael hadn't chosen this fight. He had been swept up into it, just like everyone else. What set him apart, though, was his ability to stay alive when others had fallen. It wasn't strength or skill that had kept him going. It was his ability to read the battlefield, to understand his enemies in ways others couldn't. That's when it happened. A noise, a loud rumble, followed by the ground shaking beneath his boots. The first time Kael heard it, he thought it was another bombing, but this was different. It was a growl. Deep, echoing, and powerful. Kael froze, his instincts kicking. He'd been in dangerous situations before, but nothing like this. Slowly he turned around, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound, and then he saw it. A massive creature, larger than any predator he had seen, stepped from the shadows. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural yellow hue, its body covered in sleek, black scales, the apex predator. One of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Kael's mind raced. The apex predators were known to be ruthless hunters, terrifying forces of nature that dominated their territories. They were beasts, feared by every living thing, their presence enough to send entire armies fleeing. But this one was different. The creature didn't attack. Instead, it moved carefully, almost deliberately. And then Kael saw it at its side, hidden in the shadows, was a smaller creature, a cub. The apex predator had brought its young into the chaos of the war. But what Kael saw next made his heart skip a beat. The creature did something that no one had expected. It allowed him to approach. Slowly, cautiously, Kael took a step forward. The predator's eyes never left him, but it didn't strike. It simply watched, waiting. Kael knew this was a rare opportunity. Most would have run. They would have seen this as a threat and reacted with fear. But Kael wasn't most people. He understood animals' predators, especially. He knew that showing fear was a mistake. He took another step, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The predator's gaze shifted from him to its cub, and then back to him again. Kael was close, now closer than anyone should ever get to an apex predator. His heart pounded, but he stayed calm. He knew that the creature could rip him apart in an instant, but it was waiting. For what? He wasn't sure. Then, without warning, the cub stepped forward. Kael's breath caught in his throat. The little creature was curious, its tiny steps hesitant but bold. The predator didn't growl. It didn't show any signs of aggression. Instead, it stood still, allowing the cub to approach Kael. This was unheard of. Kael had heard stories, rumors, about the apex predators, but he had never heard of one allowing a human, especially a soldier, to get this close. He felt the weight of the moment settle around him. This wasn't just a strange encounter. This was a test. The apex predator was showing him something. It was showing him trust. For the next few minutes, Kael stood still, never taking his eyes off the cub, never moving too quickly. The predator continued to observe, its piercing eyes locked on him. There was an unspoken understanding between them, something primal and deep. The cub circled around Kael, sniffing at his boots, touching its small nose to his hand. It was as if it were testing him, seeing if he could be trusted, that just as Kael's thoughts began to race. Something unexpected happened. The predator let out a low growl, but it wasn't threatening. It was almost approving. Kael slowly knelt, extending his hand towards the cub, his movements slow and steady, He felt a strange sense of connection, a bond forming between him and the creature. It wasn't just a predator and prey anymore. It was a moment of trust. And in that moment, Kael realized that this was the beginning of something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. The ground trembled again, and Kael's thoughts were pulled back to reality. The war was still raging around them. But for the first time, Kael felt a sense of calm. The predator's trust wasn't just a sign of respect, it was a message. It was a message that Kael was no longer just another human soldier. He was something more. He was someone the galaxy needed. The apex predator and its cub, who had once seemed like unstoppable forces of nature, were now showing Kael something else. Hope. In the middle of the chaos, Kael realized that perhaps he wasn't just meant to survive the war. Perhaps he was meant to lead. But before he could fully process this thought, a voice called out in the distance, a warning. The enemy was near. Kael stood, his heart beating faster now. The apex predator moved, its gaze fixed on the horizon. It was time. The war was coming for them all. And in that moment, Kael knew what he had to do. He turned to face the future, a new determination in his eyes. The apex predator trusted him. And now, even the alien girl who had been watching from the shadows was beginning to trust him too. The roar of distant explosions shattered the stillness, pulling Kael back to reality. The war wasn't waiting for him to figure out the strange moment he just shared with the apex predator. The battlefield still raged around him, but in that brief instant of quiet, something inside Kael had changed. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was someone who had earned the trust of one of the galaxy's deadliest creatures. The predator gave Kael one last look, its yellow eyes intense, almost as if it were reading his soul. With a low rumble, it turned, signaling to its cub to follow. Slowly, the two creatures moved deeper into the shadows of the war-torn landscape, leaving Kael standing in the open, his mind racing. What did this mean? The apex predator was not a pet or a companion. It was a force of nature, feared by all who crossed its path, and yet it had allowed him to get close. It had trusted him. Kael's heart was still pounding, but now it wasn't just from fear or adrenaline, it was from a sense of responsibility he hadn't expected. He stood there for a moment longer, trying to make sense of everything. The alien girl, was still watching him from a distance. He hadn't seen her approach, but he knew she had been there the whole time, observing the strange interaction between him and the predator. She had a look of quiet understanding. On her face, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes that told him she knew more than she was letting on. Kael approached her cautiously, unsure of what to say. She had been a mystery to him since their first encounter. She wasn't like the soldiers or the warriors he'd fought alongside. There was a calm, almost otherworldly presence about her, one that seemed out of place in the midst of the war. But what had drawn her to him? What did she want from him? "You saw that, didn't you?" Kael asked, his voice low, as though the words themselves might break the fragile moment they were sharing. The girl nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "I did," she said softly. "It was rare. Most humans would have attacked or run. But you didn't." Kael swallowed, trying to gather his thoughts. "I didn't want to fight it. I felt something. Something different." He paused, unsure how to continue. "I felt like it trusted me." The girl stepped closer, her movements fluid and graceful. "It did. The apex predators don't trust easily. Most of them see humans as prey, or worse, as enemies. But you showed it something different. You didn't see it as just a beast. You saw it as a living creature, not just a force of destruction." Kael's heart raced again. He'd never thought of it like that. To him, it had just been instinct. Something in him had told him to stay calm, to show respect. It wasn't until now that he realized the magnitude of the moment. The predator had seen something in him, something worth trusting. "I didn't know what I was doing," Kael admitted, his voice quieter now. I just did what felt right. The girl gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. That's exactly why it trusted you. You didn't try to control it. You didn't force it to follow your orders. You showed it respect. You showed it that you're not like the others. Kael's mind raced. Was this it? Was this the key to winning the war? Trust? Respect? Could that really be the answer? As if reading his thoughts, the girl spoke again, her tone more serious. The Predator's trust is important, Kael, but there is more at play here. You are more than just an ally to the apex predators. You are a symbol. The way you handled that encounter shows that there is a possibility for unity, something none of the factions have ever been able to achieve. But unity won't come easy. It will take more than just one interaction to bring the other factions together. Kael's eyes narrowed. You think I can do that? Bring them together? The apex predators, the humans, the aliens. None of them trust each other. How do I change that? The girl met his gaze, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. By leading. By showing them that there is something greater than war. You already earned the trust of the Predator. Now you must earn the trust of the others. The alien races are fighting their own battles, divided by old grudges and fear. But you, if you can show them that unity is possible, if you can prove that their survival depends on working together, then they will follow you. Kael was silent for a moment, considering her words. The girl wasn't wrong. He had already seen the brutal side of war, the factions fighting against each other, the violence and chaos that ruled their lives. But what if she was right? What if trust, the very thing he had shown the apex predator, was the key to winning this war? He took a deep breath, looking out over the battlefield. The sounds of the ongoing war seemed distant now, fading into the background. He wasn't just trying to survive anymore. He was trying to change the course of history. Where do we start? Kael asked, determination in his voice. The girl's gaze softened, a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. We start by earning the trust of the others. We start by showing them that we can be more than just enemies. We start by being the leaders this galaxy needs. And with that, Kael knew that this was only the beginning. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a leader, one with the power to bring change to a galaxy torn apart by war. Kael's heart was still pounding from the strange encounter with the apex predator. The trust it had shown him lingered in his mind, like a quiet whisper urging him forward. But the road ahead was far from easy. The war that had torn apart galaxies wasn't going to end with just one moment of peace. He knew that. The factions, divided by centuries of conflict, wouldn't suddenly forget their grudges. The alien girl remained at his side, her presence a constant reminder that his role in this war was shifting. She hadn't said much after their conversation, but Kael could sense that she was waiting for him to make the next move. He had been given the trust of an apex predator, and now the challenge was bigger than he had imagined. He needed to bring the factions together, to unite them against the shadowy threat of the Enshrouded. And Kael knew that the only way to do that was through trust, exactly what the apex predator had shown him. We have to begin with the Korath, the girl finally spoke, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but Kael could hear the underlying urgency. They are strong, but they are also proud and stubborn. They will not follow just anyone. But if you show them that you respect them as equals, they will listen. Kael nodded, though he felt a weight settle on his shoulders. The Korath were a powerful, fiercely independent alien race. They had no need for alliances, and in many ways, they didn't trust anyone outside their own people. The idea of uniting with them seemed almost impossible. But Kael had seen the way the apex predator had trusted him, and that had changed everything. If he could build on that, maybe he could do the same with the other factions. The girl motioned for Kael to follow her as they made their way to the Korath stronghold. a fortress-like city carved into the mountains of a rocky, war-torn planet. The skies above were dark, and a violent storm raged in the distance, just as the Koreth were known to thrive in harsh environments. The stronghold stood as a symbol of their pride and resilience. Nothing could break the Koreth. When they arrived, Kael was greeted with wary eyes. The Koreth warriors, tall and imposing, watched them with suspicion. Their armor gleamed under the dim light, and their weapons were always within reach. There was no warmth in their gaze, only calculated judgment. The leader of the Koreth, a massive warrior with deep blue scales and golden eyes, stood at the entrance to the stronghold, his gaze fixed on Kael, as though assessing his every move. The girl stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "This is Kael. He has earned the trust of the apex predator, and he comes to you not as an enemy, but as a leader who seeks unity." The Koreth leader grunted, his eyes narrowing as he sized Kael up. "The predator trusts you, human. But trust among our people is not so easily given. What makes you think you can unite us? What makes you think you can lead?" Kael took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their judgment. The Koreth were proud warriors, and their pride was not something easily swayed. But Kael had already learned something important from his encounter with the apex predator. Sometimes, leadership wasn't about force. It was about understanding, respect, and the willingness to listen. I've fought alongside predators and survivors alike. I've seen what happens when people fight alone, when they refuse to trust one another. It destroys everything, Kael said, his voice steady. But we have a chance to change that. We can't win this war divided. The Enshrouded, our true enemy, are counting on us to stay fractured. If we don't stand together, they will tear us all apart. The Koreth leader studied Kael for a long moment, the tension in the air thick enough to cut. Kael stood his ground, unwavering in his belief. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about survival, about the future. If he could convince the Koreth to join the alliance, it would send a powerful message to the other factions. Unity wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Finally, the Koreth leader spoke, his voice low and powerful. "You speak of unity, human. You speak of something that has never been possible for us, but perhaps it is time to consider another way. If you can prove that this is more than just words, if you can prove that you are not like the others, we will follow. We will fight with you, but first you must earn our respect." Kael felt a surge of hope. The Koreth weren't ready to join just yet, but they were listening. And that was a step in the right direction. "I don't expect to lead through force," Kael replied, his voice unwavering. "But I will prove to you that unity is stronger than division." The Koreth leader nodded, his expression shifting just slightly. "We will see, human, we will see." With that, the Koreth turned and disappeared into the stronghold, leaving Kael standing in the dim light of the mountainside. The girl stood next to him, her gaze focused on the retreating warriors. "You've made progress," she said quietly. "The Koreth are proud, but they respect strength. And they will respect you if you show them that you are more than just another warrior." Kael nodded, his mind racing. He wasn't sure if he could unite all the factions, but he knew that this was the first step. The apex predator had shown him trust, and now the Koreth had shown him a glimmer of hope. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time, Kael felt like they were on the right path. The days following Kael's encounter with the Koreth leader were a whirlwind. The Koreth, though still reluctant, had agreed to meet with the other factions. Their respect for Kael had been earned, but it wasn't enough to guarantee their trust. It was a fragile alliance, and Kael knew he had to prove that this unity was more than just a fleeting idea. The road ahead would be tough, but it was the only path forward. Kael couldn't afford to waste time. The Enshrouded were growing stronger. They had made their move in the shadows, gathering forces while the factions continued to fight amongst themselves. Kael knew that each day they spent divided was a day the Enshrouded gained the upper hand. The girl, still by his side, had become more than just an observer. She was now his ally, someone who understood the intricacies of the galaxy and the factions they were trying to unite. Her knowledge was invaluable, and Kael had come to trust her judgment. "We need to act quickly," she said one evening as they sat by a small fire, the stars overhead barely visible through the thick smoke of the war. "The Kael are next. If we can convince them, we can bring more power to our side." "But they are a different kind of challenge," Kael nodded. "The Jae were fierce warriors, brutal, relentless, and proud. Their reputation preceded them, and their history of fighting against anyone who threatened their independence was well known. They didn't form alliances easily, and they trusted only those who could prove their worth in battle. Convincing them won't be easy," Kael said, his voice thoughtful. "But they're not like the Korath. They're not fighting for survival anymore, they're fighting for power. If I show them that unity is the path to victory, they'll listen." The girl's eyes narrowed. "They're a proud species. Show them too much weakness, and they'll see you as an easy target. But if you show them that your strength comes from the alliances you've already forged, they'll understand that this is more than just a fight, it's a way to ensure their future." Kael wasn't entirely sure he could win over the Kael with words alone. The Kael were a race that valued strength and combat above all else. Their leader, the one who controlled their armies, was said to be a warrior unmatched in skill and ferocity. Convincing him to join forces would require more than diplomacy. It would require Kael to prove his worth in ways he hadn't yet been tested. He stood up, looking at the girl with resolve in his eyes. "Then we'll meet them on their terms. We'll fight together, and I'll show them that unity is our greatest strength." The journey to the Kael stronghold was treacherous, and Kael couldn't help but feel the weight of what lay ahead. The journey took them through barren, storm-swept plains and desolate mountains, each step taking them closer to a confrontation that would decide the future of the galaxy. As they approached the Kael stronghold, the air grew thick with tension. The Kael had carved their city into the side of a massive, jagged cliff, and the view from the base was nothing short of intimidating. Their stronghold was a fortress of sharp angles and towering spires, designed to strike fear into any who dared approach. The Kael did not welcome outsiders, especially not those seeking alliances. The girl stood next to Kael, her voice low as she spoke. "Remember, they respect strength, but they also respect those who can endure. If you can fight with them and prove that you're not afraid, they'll listen. But only if they see you as an equal." Kael's heart raced. He had already fought countless battles, but this felt different. The Kael were no ordinary opponents, they were a force unto themselves. And Kael wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the future of all the species in the galaxy. They were led to the central chamber of the Kael stronghold, where their leader, a towering figure named Thalrak, stood waiting. His eyes, glowing amber in the dim light, scanned Kael up and down, taking in the human who dared to challenge his power. "You come here seeking an alliance," Thalrak's voice boomed. "But we do not join the weak. We do not bow to others. You are human. What makes you think you can change the way of the Kael?" Kael stood tall, meeting the Kael leader's gaze without hesitation. "I'm not here to bow. I'm here to fight with you. You and I both know that power alone won't win this war. It will take more than strength, it will take unity." Thalrak laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the chamber. "Unity? You think your alliance of humans, Korath, and apex predators can stand against the might of the Kael? We do not need alliances, we need warriors." Kael's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't back down. "Then prove it. Show me your warriors. I will fight alongside them, not as a leader, but as an equal. If you can defeat me, then you have my respect. But if I win, you will join the alliance." Thalrak's amber eyes gleamed with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Very well. If you wish to prove your worth, you will fight alongside us. But be warned, human, this will not be easy. Kael nodded, his resolve unwavering. He was about to face the most challenging test of his life. If he could win this fight, it would not only prove his strength, it would prove to the HFY that he wasn't just a human trying to survive. He was a leader, and he would fight for the future of the galaxy. The battle began with a roar. Kael had no time to think, only to react. He fought with everything he had, his body moving with the speed and precision that came from years of battle experience. The HFY warriors were relentless, but Kael was focused. He didn't fight them to win, he fought to show them that unity wasn't about leading them. It was about fighting with them. And slowly, the HFY began to see what Kael had hoped. He wasn't just a soldier. He was one of them. The fight with the HFY had been brutal, but Kael had done what he set out to do. He had earned their respect. The battle wasn't just about defeating warriors, it was about showing them that he was no different from them. That he was willing to fight alongside them, not just command from afar. Kael had won the respect of the HFY, but the true test was still ahead. They had proven themselves, but the galaxy's factions were still divided, and the Enshrouded were growing stronger by the day. After the fight, Thalrak, the HFY leader, had approached Kael with a new, but wary respect. You fought well, human, he said, his voice deep and gruff. But do not think that this is the end. There are still others who will not accept your unity. Kael nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. I know, but it's a start. With the HFY now on his side, Kael knew that the next step was to unite the remaining factions. The Korath had agreed to join, and the apex predators were already loyal. But it wasn't enough. The Enshrouded were relentless, and Kael needed more than just strength, he needed unity. And to do that, he needed the support of everyone. Girl had been watching from the shadows as always. She had been with Kael since the very beginning, and her quiet presence had become a comforting constant. As Kael made his way back to their camp, she fell in step beside him, her eyes studying him with an unreadable expression. You've done it, she said softly, her voice calm and measured. The HFY are with us. But there is still a long way to go. The Enshrouded won't wait. They know that the factions are coming together. Kael's mind was focused on the task at hand, but he knew she was right. The battle for the galaxy was far from over. The Enshrouded had already started their final move and assault on the heart of the galaxy itself. But Kael wasn't going to let them win, not now. Not after everything they had been through. We have to act fast, Kael said, his voice steady. We can't let them tear apart everything we've worked for. The girl gave him a sidelong glance. You're not just leading an army, Kael. You're leading a movement. The galaxy is divided, but you've shown that it's possible to bring them together. The question is, can you convince the rest to join before the Enshrouded make their move? Kael stopped walking and turned to face her. He had come to trust her in ways he hadn't expected. Her insight had been invaluable, and she was right. He wasn't just leading a battle. He was leading a revolution, a chance to unite species that had been enemies for centuries. I have to try, Kael said. It's our only chance. If we wait too long, it'll be too late. The girl nodded. Then you must move quickly. There's one more faction you have to reach, the Vraxians. They are isolated and distrustful of outsiders, but they hold the key to the final piece of the puzzle. Their military might could turn the tide in this war. Kael's mind immediately went to work, formulating a plan. The Vraxians were a mysterious race, known for their advanced technology and battle tactics. They had always kept to themselves, refusing to align with any of the other factions. Convincing them to join would be the ultimate test of his leadership, but Kael was ready. He couldn't fail now. We'll go to them, Kael said, determination in his voice. We'll prove that unity is stronger than isolation. It's the only way we can stop the Enshrouded. The journey to the Vraxian stronghold was unlike any Kael had undertaken before. The Vraxians lived in a hidden city on the edge of the galaxy, their home protected by advanced technology and an impenetrable defense system. The terrain around the stronghold was treacherous high cliffs, swirling storms, and the ever-present threat of hostile forces. The Vraxians had built their city to be a fortress, and Kael had to find a way inside. When they finally arrived, Kael was struck by the scale of the Vraxian stronghold. The city stretched for miles, its walls gleaming with alien technology. There were no traditional gates or entry points. It was a place designed for those who could get in by force, not by invitation. The girl stood beside him, her gaze focused on the complex city. "We can't just walk in," she said. "The Vraxians don't trust anyone, especially not outsiders. You will have to show them that you are worthy." Kael took a deep breath. The task ahead was daunting, but he had come this far. He had faced impossible odds before, and this would be no different. It was time to prove that the movement he had started was more than just words. It was a force capable of bringing the galaxy together. The journey to convince the Vraxians had not been easy, but Kael had known it would be their final challenge. The Vraxians were a hidden people, fiercely independent and distrustful of any outsider. Their fortress city, standing tall and impenetrable against the galaxy's storms, symbolized everything they believed in: strength, self-reliance, and survival at any cost. But Kael had something the Vraxians couldn't ignore: hope. Hope for a future where the galaxy wasn't torn apart by war. He had already shown that unity was more than a possibility. He had earned the trust of the apex predators, brought the Korath and Kael into his alliance, and now, the last faction, the Vraxians, remained. This was the final test, and Kael knew that without their support, their combined forces would be insufficient to defeat the Enshrouded. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the heart of the galaxy, the future they were fighting for. The girl stood beside him, her expression as calm as always, but Kael could see the same tension in her that he felt. This was the moment. They couldn't afford to fail. "Now we don't have much time," Kael said, his voice low. The Enshrouded were close. They could feel the threat of their forces closing in. If the Vraxians didn't join them now, the galaxy would be lost. "We'll get through to them," the girl replied, her voice steady and unwavering. "You've earned their trust before. You've earned the trust of every faction you've approached. You can do the same with the Vraxians." As they made their way toward the center of the Vraxian stronghold, Kael could feel the weight of his mission bearing down on him. The city was quiet, eerily so. The towering, sleek buildings seemed to watch him, silent sentinels of a race that had long since withdrawn from the galaxy's conflicts. The Vraxians were hidden for a reason. They didn't want to be part of this war. But the Enshrouded had given them no choice. At the heart of the city, they were met by the Vraxian leader, a woman whose presence was as commanding as the city itself. Her name was Tal Rith, a fierce, intelligent leader whose mind was as sharp as her combat skills. She had seen the galaxy's many wars, and her people had survived by staying neutral, isolated, and out of reach. She had no intention of changing that, but Kael's arrival, with the other factions behind him, changed everything. "You dare to come here, human?" Tal Rith's voice was cold, her gaze piercing. "We don't fight your wars. We've kept ourselves hidden for a reason." Kael stepped forward, his resolve clear. "I'm not here to ask you to fight someone else's battle. I'm here to ask you to fight for the future. The Enshrouded are not like any enemy you've faced before. If you stay isolated, you will fall. We need you together. We can stop them." Tal Rith's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. "And why would we join forces with you? Why should we trust you or anyone else when all we've known is betrayal?" Kael's heart beat in his chest, but he held her gaze. "Because we've all been betrayed. Every faction, every species in this galaxy has been torn apart by war, by fear, But we have a choice now together. We have the power to stop the Enshrouded before they destroy everything. I know you want to keep your people safe. We can offer that, but we need your help to survive." The girl beside Kael stepped forward, her eyes unwavering as she added, "The future of this galaxy is in your hands, Talrith. The Vraxians have always been powerful, but this power is nothing without allies. The Enshrouded will stop at nothing to erase everything that stands in their way. Will you let them?" For a long moment, the room fell silent. Talrith studied Kael and the girl, her mind clearly working through the weight of their words. She had always prided herself on independence, on her people's ability to survive alone. But something in Kael's words resonated with her. She knew they couldn't keep hiding forever. The Enshrouded had already begun their assault on the galaxy, and staying hidden was no longer an option. Finally, Talrith spoke, her voice much softer than before. "If we join you, it's not because of your words alone. It's because you've already shown us that you understand what it means to fight, to lead, and to unite. If you can prove yourself in battle, if you can show that you're more than just a human trying to survive, we'll stand with you." Kael's heart lifted. "We'll show you," he said firmly. "We'll fight together. The future depends on it." With that, Talrith nodded and motioned for Kael and the girl to follow her. "Then it is decided, we will fight. But remember, we will fight as equals." The entire city began to hum with a renewed energy as the Vraxians made their preparations. Kael could feel the strength of their people coming together, the power of their unity. The battle against the Enshrouded was finally within their reach. The final moments of the war had arrived. It was time to lead them all to victory. With the Vraxians now part of their alliance, Kael knew they had the power to defeat the Enshrouded. But it wasn't just about power, it was about unity, about trust, and about showing that the future didn't have to be one of division. They could stand together, stronger than ever. The time to fight for the galaxy had come.